Welcome back. Biology of cells and tissues, macromolecules of the cell. We're going to jump into lipids. This one's a little bit shorter, so I think we're just going to make up for the extra long video last one, make this part really short, and then do carbohydrates in the next part. So lipids, when we talk about lipids, they are biochemically, structurally diverse. That's a fancy way of saying there's a whole bunch of different kinds of them, and they're all built differently. They are hydrophobic. You will hear a lot from Dr. Sarkar, like dissolves like. What this means is when you take oil and water don't mix, okay? Fats will dissolve in fats. Water stuff will dissolve in water stuff. So like globular proteins, they're water soluble. That's because they are going to be hydrophilic. So kind of hydrophobic, hydrophilic, lipophilic. You're going to hear those terms tossed around a lot. Just get used to understanding what that means. Hydro is water, like hydration. Phobic means afraid of. So if it's afraid of water, it's a fat. Okay, lipids are stable in non-polar solvents. They're mostly hydrocarbon chains containing carbon and hydrogen. What that means is when you look at them, you'll see, like fats, you'll see a lot of lines, basically like drawn like this. And it's like, oh, there's your fat. In chemistry, what this means, every intersegment right here, if nothing is labeled, it's supposed to be taken as a carbon atom is there. Additionally, if, typically you'd count like how many bonds there are and how many electrons total there are. If there aren't enough bonds, like if there's a carbon here and there's 1, 2 bonds, that leaves 2 carbons or 2 electrons unbonded, where you're just supposed to assume that there are hydrogens bound there as well, unless otherwise specified. Okay, just a little bit of biochemistry nomenclature is what we call that, which can be a little bit annoying, but it is what it is. Some have polar regions, amphipathic, which means they have a hydrophobic and a hydrophilic part. So part of it is hydrophobic, part of it is hydrophilic. So it has those properties of both. Looking at classes of lipids, we're going to look at these different kinds. So we have fatty acids, saturated and unsaturated. When you talk about saturated versus unsaturated, you're talking about it's saturated with hydrogens. So just like I said right here, when you draw the whole structure, actually we can zoom way in and take a look at it here. So see how it's drawn? Every single point, so carbon, 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 every single point here is a carbon. If it's saturated, we see how there's no double bonds, they're all single bonds. That means it's fully saturated with hydrogen. So off of every single one of these carbons, there's enough hydrogen to make it the appropriate number of electrons. So like this one here at the end has 3 hydrogens. This one has 2 hydrogens. This one has 2 hydrogens, 2 hydrogens, and so on and so forth. Unsaturated means that it doesn't have a full amount of hydrogens. We have these double bonds right in there. The double bonds, meaning that, in here we look at this, so this hydrogen, 1, 2, 3, only has, this carbon has 1, 2, 3, just 1 hydrogen there. 1, 2, 3, 1 hydrogen, 1 hydrogen, 1 hydrogen. So it's not fully saturated like these saturated fats, thus the name. We also have, and those are our fatty acids. We also have triglycerols. You may have also heard triglycerol be talked about as a triglyceride. That's like the blood test that you have run. You check your triglycerides. You'll learn a lot more about those in Biochemistry 2. You'll touch on them in Biochem 1. Biochem 2 is when you really, really hit a lot of the fat stuff pretty hard. And basically all a triglyceride is, tri meaning 3, glycer meaning glycerol. So we have a glycerol backbone, 3 fatty acid chains, and we have our dehydration reactions, and our glycerol attaches to those fatty acid chains to give us a triacylglycerol, aka a triglyceride. Then we have phospholipids. Phospholipids are super, super important, okay? Because phospholipids, the question that is always, 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 always asked about phospholipids is, what is the cell membrane made out of? And the answer is a phospholipid bilayer. This question is always asked, like, in a lot of classes. So please remember that. Alright. Continuing, we also have glycolipids. If you think, remember, we look at triacylglycerol, glycerol, and glyco. Glyco meaning glycogen, glucose. Think sugar. So we can have it bound to a sugar, a monosaccharide, so a sugar being bound to fatty acids. We can have steroids. Steroids, you'll hear that word thrown around quite a bit. Steroids are going to be hormones, and all of our hormones, the base of our hormones is going to be cholesterol. Okay, so we'll want to remember cholesterol really, really well. Cholesterol is always connected to steroids and is going to be connected to lots of our different hormones. Finally, we have terpenes. We don't talk a lot about terpenes. You'll see more about this, again, more in Biochemistry 2. Right now, you just need to know the word. Terpene is a type of lipid. So here are those different classes of lipids. We have the fatty acids, the triglycerides, aka triglycerols, the phospholipids, remember the cell membrane, no, triacylglycerols. Triacylglycerols. There we go. Glycolipids, sugar plus fat. Steroids, cholesterol / hormones. Terpenes. You might want to remember isoprene. Isoprene. That will come back in Biochem 2. We don't really talk a lot about it otherwise. But yeah, as well, you can see this is connected also to vitamin A. A little bit early to be mentioning this, but we have fat-soluble vitamins, A, D, E, and K. A, D, E, and K are fat-soluble. It's not to say that those are all terpenes, but these are the ones that you will want to start to remember those for the future. Good to expose you now for later. Fatty acids are the building blocks of several classes of lipids. So fatty acids are components of several other kinds of lipids. A fatty acid is a long amphipathic. We saw that word before. Oftentimes, if I see a new word that I have not seen before or that looks, kind of big and confusing, I will write the definition out on several different slides. Give yourself more chances to see the definition, see the word, and understand what it means. So, has both hydrophilic and hydrophobic parts. So it's amphipathic, unbranched hydrocarbon chain with a carboxyl group at one end. The polar carboxyl group is the head, and the nonpolar hydrocarbon chain is the tail. We look at the fatty acids again. Right here, we have carbon side. The carboxyl group right here, this is the head. And the hydrocarbon chain, this is the hydrocarbon chain over here, is the tail. Head versus tail. And we may want to remember polar. I'll do highlight green. The polar part is the head. Nonpolar. Excuse me. The nonpolar is the tail. That's anytime that we can find connections and connect different words, easier it is to remember it long term. Okay. Triacylglycerols, also known as triglycerides, already mentioned that, have the glycerol molecule with 3 fatty acids attached to it. Glycerol is a 3-carbon alcohol with a hydroxyl group on each carbon. Whenever we see the word alcohol, think OH. Or OH, our hydroxyl, is our alcohol. So that hydroxyl group on each of those carbons. Fatty acids are linked to glycerol, one at a time, by these special bonds called ester bonds. We'll want to remember and connect triacylglycerols. Let's do green because it's not offensive to the eyes. Triacylglycerols are connected to ester bonds and glycerol. Okay? Connect those 3 together. There's our triacylglycerol synthesis. Here's even more of that synthesis. Sorry, this is actually changing. We switched gears. It's weird that they didn't have a... Let me fix this. Design. Never mind. I won't do that. I'm going to take that. I like all of my stuff to be very neatly labeled and clear what we're talking about. So now we are talking about phospholipids. And actually, let me do this. Put that to the side, right there. Phospholipids. A little bit live editing of the process. So we have fatty acid chains bound together with a phosphate group. These are going to have a hydrophilic phosphate head and a hydrophobic tails. Hydrophilic, aka lipophobic. Hydrophobic, aka lipophilic tails. Just throw in as many of the AKAs and all this stuff in there as I can just as a nice reminder as we get used to the terminology that we're using in these core science classes. Okay? And here is that cell membrane formation. The phospholipids and glycolipids form a self-sealing lipid bilayers that are the basis for all cellular membranes. There's the phospholipids, are two fatty chains plus the phosphate group. Glycolipids, the carbohydrate chain, replaces the phosphate group. And I'm going to add a little... I'll add it onto this part right here. These form it's called a semi-permeable phospholipid bilayer, which surrounds each of our cells and helps control what goes in/out of the cell. Remember this right here. This is going to be very, very important in the future. We'll see this a lot, especially in future courses. All of Physiology 1 next trimester, the first whole chunk of material focuses all on that phospholipid bilayer. Steroids, aka hormones. A couple of those examples: cortisol, aldosterone, testosterone, estrogen, all of these guys. There's a lot of words in here. I'm going to add some details in here. This is not stuff that you necessarily need to know right now, but it's good information to start hearing these terms, okay? So whenever we hear the word androgen, I want to make sure I don't give you too much. Let's do this. Let's say always associate steroids with fats / cholesterol specifically. A lot of our steroid hormones are produced in the adrenal gland, aka the suprarenal gland. It's a gland that sits on top of your kidneys. That is the androgens, cortisol, aldosterone, all that kind of stuff. We will touch on these in the future in this course, looking more in general kind of at like the histological, so like the cellular, histological means cellular, structure of the those glands themselves. We're not going to dive, you don't dive super deep into the adrenal glands until trimester 3 in Phys 2. And then you'll have a ton of stuff about the adrenal glands because they are very, very common pathologically in patients that we see and that we treat, especially in the American population with, the high inflammatory load, we'll call it, that we tend to have as a culture. I say that as you can see in the corner, I literally have my French fries and Wisconsin cheese curds right here. But that's my late night snack that every once in a while it's okay. Okay. The diverse function of steroids. We have 3 6-carbon rings plus 1 5-carbon ring. They like this question because it's super easy to throw it in there to see if you read through everything. Cholesterol, this is being the most common. But it's going to be 1 sec. Sorry, my wife was calling me real quick. Okay, so cholesterol being the most common, found in the membrane, regulates membrane fluidity, involved in cellular signaling, and the source of all of these steroid hormones. Know the general stuff right now. This is another perfect little flashcard kind of thing. Put each of these into its own flashcard and say, which of the following, what's found in the membrane? Cholesterol, or phospholipid bilayer, all that kind of stuff. Start to associate all those different things. We just want to get the general idea of things in this course. Terpenes are synthesized from the 5-carbon compound isoprene and are sometimes called isoprenoids. Word association. You want to associate these words together so that way if you see them on a test, you can connect the dots. Don't worry about knowing what all of these things are. Just figure out and associate them together. Okay, so terpenes, isoprene, isoprenoid. Connect it with vitamin A and the word carotenoid. If you think vitamin A, think about carrots. Carrots have beta carotene. Beta carotene is a carotenoid. Okay. We will dive deeper into all of this kind of terminology, these kind of specifics in the future. This is just, get the general stuff. And here is just kind of that general vitamin A, isoprene, know those words. Terpenes are the primary constituents of the essential oils of many types of plants and animals. Essential oils are used widely as fragrances in perfumery, traditional medicine, such as aromatherapy. Each of these has a link to it. You don't need to click on each of these links. It's just some of them lead to some pretty cool research and some pretty good studies. Okay, there we go. That is the lipids. This is, again, part 3 of hopefully just 4 parts. We'll see. We have a good chunk of slides left, so we might have to do another 2 parts. So thank you all for watching, and have a wonderful day.